Good afternoon and welcome to Markets Today. I'm your host, Mbithe Mwema. We have a lot of interesting things that are set up for you today. Firstly, we will be giving you an overview of what happened on the equities market yesterday. But secondly, which is something I'm also very excited about, is we are trying to understand, are there other alternative asset classes that are available to you as an investor in Kenya? We are speaking to Mr. Kevin Ngángá, who is the CEO of Scope Markets. But prior to that, let's take a look at what happened yesterday on the NSE. Turnover was up almost 1,000% to 841 million. What was happening with regards to the foreign investors and the local investors? The foreigners were about 46% of the market trades, whereas the local investors were 55% of the local trades. And I suddenly see the push from the local investors with regards to turnover over the day. Top traded stocks, equity, Safaricom, KCB, no figure. These are always the top traded stocks over any particular day if you're looking at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. What, however, we find very interesting is the fact that East African Breweries did announce its first half results last week on Friday, but we haven't seen too much activity there in spite of the fact that they have increased their interim dividend payout by 20%. Stepping aside from the Nairobi Securities Exchange, where you possibly have maybe 6 particular stocks that you can actively engage in. And just to give you a recap of what we have been discussing in January and February is the direction of the economy. When we look at currency, we have had people say that they expect the currency outlook to be more or less stable in this particular year. Interest rates stable, inflation stable. So you have a stable macroeconomic environment. What does that mean for equities? What does it mean for debt, which have been the traditional asset classes that we've been looking at? But now today we want to take a step further and look at either currency, what trades that you can actually facilitate in any respective capacity. But over and above that, we want to understand, are there any additional asset classes that you can look at if you are an investor domiciled in Kenya? Welcome to the show, Mr. Kevin Ngángá.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
All right. Scope Markets. What does Scope Markets do? What is it all about?
Thank you. Scope Markets is Kenya's second licensed online Forex broker. We are regulated by the Capital Markets Authority under the Capital Markets Regulations for Online Forex that were published in 2017. We are very proud to be associated with giving Kenyans a global investing alternative. Traditionally, you are exposed to markets such as cash, fixed deposits, local equities, bonds, but that doesn't give you a global view. We at Scope Markets have thought about this and said, look, why don't we create a community of traders that can access global opportunities? What do I mean? Today, you can trade multiple asset classes on our trading platform. You can trade things like gold, which is traditionally considered an inflation hedge. You can trade asset classes like oil. So you can look at global macroeconomic factors and say, okay, how does my portfolio look from a global macro perspective? We've seen oil come down about, 6-7%,
yes,
which from a local context is good because 18% of our import bill is typically oil imports. So that's definitely strong for what I would call the current account deficit.
Depending on how long it stays down.
Depending on how long it stays. There are always geopolitical risks,
yes,
especially with what's happening, the tensions in the Middle East. And then questions like exogenous factors like coronavirus.
Yes.
Those present actual investment opportunities. Despite the humanitarian crisis that we are seeing with all those dead, we still see opportunities. I'll give you an example. Our portfolio allowed our clients to be able to short the Dow Jones on Friday.
Short is sell.
To sell,
okay,
sorry.
To sell.
Yes, to sell,
yes,
and take a profit. The Dow Jones went down 400 points on Friday and went back up 400 points on Monday. And when your local equities market is sort of dovetailing around a range-bound trading, you can look at your portfolio and identify global opportunities. And that's what Scope Markets is about. And how do we access these markets? These markets are accessed through a product called contracts for difference,
okay,
which completely reflect.
So that's CFDs,
yes.
sorry.
So those CFDs completely reflect the actual underlying stock. So if, for example, you were to buy GlaxoSmithKline shares and there was a dividend action, you would get credited into your trading account the proceeds of the dividend, net of any withholding tax or net of any tax that. And that's what we want. We want Kenyans to be able to get onto their M-Pesa, deposit $200 into their trading account, do research on GlaxoSmithKline. Diageo released their results last week. If there's a correlation with the EABL stock, with what's happening is emerging markets starting to contribute significantly to Diageo, the spirits business is growing, you can get exposure to the parent.
Yes.
By trading Diageo shares. We have British American Tobacco that trades on our platform that can also reflect that. And that's what we want to do, give Kenyans. Deposit money into your M-Pesa, from your M-Pesa account into a trading account, and be able to get exposures in these global equity stocks.
So there's global equities, there's global commodities.
There's global commodities.
And then there's also currency as well.
There's currencies as well. So
okay.
I'll give an example. Outlook for 2020,
Actually, what is your outlook? And
okay.
when you're looking at a global level and as well as looking at the Kenyan currency.
Yeah. So of course, the biggest theme going into 2020 was whether the Fed is going to continue cutting rates, and there was expected that the dollar would come under pressure because depreciation in interest rates would make it less attractive, and most investors would look at riskier bets. But you've seen what's happening in the global markets. You've seen a lot of risk on plays. You've seen geopolitical tensions in Iran. That has completely changed that. So my view has been that I think there are other global markets that have negative interest rates. So outlook for me I still look that dollar would continue being strength. I do have a very big question mark with regards to the US election. So I do think there's going to be a political premium that we must consider. Critically, we also want to see how the next phase of the US-China trade deals are going to happen. We've seen the first part of Brexit happen on the 31st.
Okay.
I think market players who are looking at global opportunities need to be very cautious around what I call exogenous factors. Non-economic factors come into play. What does coronavirus mean for us going into the second quarter of the trading years? Yeah.
Okay, so when you're looking at, let's look at trading currencies.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are certain pairs that are more profitable than any other
Yes,
pairs.
yes.
But before we come into that, what is your outlook when you're looking at positioning yourself in the Forex markets?
Okay.
Should I look at geopolitical risks, things such as coronavirus on a 1 month rolling basis? Should I have a view of a 3-month basis, 6 months or 12 months? What's the rule of thumb?
So typically, if you're a strategic, if FX is a strategic part of your portfolio, what do I mean by strategic? I mean it's not you don't look at it as a cash generating portfolio. You want to look at what are the economic fundamentals. So you want to look at US elections in November. You want to look at US trade tension coming up. You want to look at what is the outlook for Europe-UK relations from a strategic perspective. So one of the key currencies I'll be very looking at is the euro dollar. I think with interest rates, with the US saying that they're probably going to hold interest rates for the next one, I expect that if political aspects for the US election, it would be probably a risk-on perspective, so I'd expect to see dollar strength going forward. That's number one. But if you're looking at FX as a cash generating, so short-term plays, I'll look at the more volatile currency pairs. I'd look at New Zealand. I'd look at the New Zealand US dollar pair. I'd look at GDP New Zealand dollar pair. I'll look at commodity currencies. You've seen commodities such as copper fall to 11-year lows. So you'd look at commodity currencies being under a bit of pressure against dollar. So if I'm looking for cash generation, i.e. short-term, 1 month, I'm looking to generate some cash off my Forex portfolio, then I'll look at those sort of currencies.
Okay. How long have you been at Scope Markets, or rather looking at foreign currency?
So personally, I've been a trader for 18 years.
18 years, okay.
I have worked in treasuries, and Forex is my life.
Forex is your
my
life.
passion.
Okay.
Yes.
So if I look at last year, what was the best pair that you saw trade in the market?
I think last year for me, I was very impressed with the resilience of the dollar shilling.
All right.
I was pleasantly surprised that with dollar strength that was seen across the board, the CARES was one of the, what I would
Yes.
say, a sore thumb. I'm actually quite now impressed with the Ghanaian CD.
Okay. Oh yes, that's actually been the best performer.
Yes, this year.
This
so
year.
I want to spend a bit more time looking at the macros because I've had a bit of experience with the Ghanaian CD in my prior life, and Ghanaian CD, the Ghanaian economy had some structural challenges. They've just issued a 40-year Euro bond.
Yes, they have.
Which had, I think, of interest of about 14 billion. They've just issued the first tranche of 750 million.
Yes.
I think that's a shot of confidence. So I would definitely be this year very keen to see
To just see
Ghanaian
what happens
CD.
there. And that's the Ghanaian CD
That's
trading against the dollar.
Against the dollar. The only thing I would caution investors is to note that entry and exit into Ghana market is not as easy as that. So you want to be very clear about how you're going to hedge your exit risk.
So would your platform offer that?
No, at the moment, no, we don't offer
Okay.
Ghanaian CD. However, there is a long-term play to look at African currencies.
They're not the easiest.
The problem with African currencies is liquidity.
Yes.
I would want to offer something on my platform that has very strong liquidity, because what you typically find is, I'll give you an example, like the Turkish lira is on my platform.
Okay.
But there's a lot of exogenous impacts where you would find that the Turkish central bank can double the overnight swap rates,
Yes.
which just kills liquidity for the market. So I'm happy to give people who have a very strong appetite for risk
That kind of access.
offering.
All
but
right.
African currencies settlement is always a big challenge.
Okay. So then what's a winning pair that you're telling your clients to look out for, at least in the short term?
I'm definitely very excited about GDP and New Zealand dollar.
Okay.
I think there's a very big aspect there for carry risk. I think the New Zealand economy is showing some very interesting signs.
What's happening there when you say interesting?
I think with reduction of interest rates, it's a very big opportunity for carry interest. So I would be looking at that very keenly. We do post as well a lot of research. So
Is
I'm
this
happy to share.
available? Is it
Yes,
available
it's
to the
all free.
public,
It's available
or
to the public.
how
yes.
would anyone interested be able to access this?
You would just need to register on our platform, which is on www.scopemarkets.co.ke. Once you just register, you would just be onboarded, and then you'd have access to all the premium content, and it's all free. So
And it's all
we're
free.
not asking you to put up any money for any research.
I can't wait to see what the catch is at some point. They always say there's no free lunch.
There's never any
There's
free
never
lunch.
any free
No,
lunch.
No.
Okay, let's just take a quick break and we will be back shortly discussing currencies and global assets.